Sogo Ishii is a pioneer of Japanese cinema. His punk sensibilities helped pave the way for many of the independent auteurs that dominated the 90s new wave. But while many of his contemporaries garner moderate to large scale success well beyond Japan, Ishii still exists in relative obscurity in the West, with most of his films lacking any real distribution outside of his native homeland. But his impact and influence is unmeasurable. My name is Rob and welcome to my channel where we look at the wonders of East Asian cinema and its filmmakers. Today, Sogo Ishii. Born in 1958, Hakata meant Ishii experienced a wealth of American influences due to the military presence there. It wasn't long until punk made its journey to Japan, and for someone like Ishii, it offered exactly what he needed. His generation was really the first to experience the new emerging world of post-war Japan, and as a result he grew up overshadowed by the oppressive fears, doubts, anxieties and paranoia of the older generation. The school system becomes strict and harsh as it expects success from the next generation so that Japan can thrive in the modern world. Japanese youth felt alienated and alone, and thus punk rock thrived. Ishii enrolls in Nihon University where he establishes the Crazy Film Group, which he uses to produce manic and aggressive Super 8 short. One of these shorts was Panic High School, which gets seen by a production company, Nikatsu, who were primarily known for pink films and thus no stranger to low budgets, high concepts, provocative themes and new talent. And hence they helped develop it into a feature, as long as it's co-directed by veteran Yukihira Sawada. The film portrays a student killing his teacher and the fallout of such an event as he attempts to run from the various institutions that have led him to such an outburst. The film is a harrowing plea for help from a generation that feels helpless. Sadly though, the film is visually rather stagnant due to the input of Sawada, which ultimately dampens the overall effect as Ishii was really trying to rebel against any classicalism, but ultimately unable to do so with Panic High School, something he would make sure didn't happen with his next film, Crazy Thunder Road. Made as his thesis film and eventually picked up by Toei, Crazy Thunder Road sees Ishii present a true piece of punk filmmaking. Aggressive, hyperkinetic, angry young angst and alienated masculinity create the template for this thematic depiction of the punk ideology. The film ultimately creates the template for what would become cyberpunk in Japan. The film especially influences the classic anime masterpiece Akira. Ishii then follows up with yet another punk tour de force, Burst City. Here we see everything that was done before personified to its visual and thematic limits. It's an assault on the senses and is arguably the stylistic catalyst for an entire underground movement of filmmakers. His kinetic camera becomes the dominant visual language for independent cinema. Filmmakers like Tsukamoto, Fuki, Sono, Miike all learn from the blueprint Ishii provides. Ishii then moves away from his male-dominated narratives and critiques the Japanese family structure in Crazy Family. Here he uses his style in a more natural setting. Here his camera disrupts and dissects the nuclear family to question the new idealized qualities of the dominant capitalist regime of the 80s. The narrative follows a family that move out of their tiny Tokyo apartment to a suburban ideal home. The nuclear capitalist dream is achieved. But just like his previous films, an emotional anger is ever brooding, and the film slowly builds to deconstruct the idealistic fantasy they have believed in. This is a staple technique for Ishii. Everything always builds to destruction, anger, violence, which leads to change. In Crazy Family, the narrative crescendos into violence that results in the family tearing down their home and choosing to live a homeless life, and it ultimately leads to happiness as they reject the materialism that has controlled them. But as influential as these films were, they sadly didn't make money, and in the film industry, that means you're not successful.
Where's the money?
So Ishii shifts to the music industry and ultimately leaves film for a while, almost for a decade. After almost a decade away from feature filmmaking with only a few shorts here and there, Ishii returns with Angel Dust in 1994. The first in a line of female-centered films that would occupy his output for the foreseeable future. Now he moves away from the male-orientated anger of his punk films and turns to a more mature, subtle sense of surrealism, which is most present in his 1995 masterpiece, August in the Water. The film is a complete shift from the visual style of his kinetic camera work, yet the essence still remains, as here normality always seems seconds away from falling apart. The film feels like a dream, that calm moment before a storm, the feeling of slow motion as something bad begins to happen, and it is here where August in the Water exists for its entire runtime. Ishii seems to still be invested with characters living on the fringe of society, outsiders caught in the collectivism of Japanese life. For Ishii, normality is always a stone throw away from abnormality, and that's exactly what August in the Water is. Next, Ishii creates again one of his best films, Labyrinth of Dreams. The film centres around a female bus conductor that falls in love with her driver, whom she suspects of being a serial killer. It's a beautiful period piece set to a beautiful black and white photography. Here Ishii shows that people are slaves to their job, and the pursuit of love and death offers this heroine a form of control, and possibly the only control she will ever have. All of his characters in some way rebel or break norms. Here we see characters deliberately choose to put their life in danger because in some weird way that makes them feel alive. In Labyrinth of Dreams, it adds uncertainty to the regimented regime of Japan's work ethic, an ideology that works to remove all uncertainties. That is really what all of his characters do. They rebel against the strict regimented society of Japan, and whether it be through pure emotional outrage of the Burst City punks or the abnormal deviant feeling of August in the Water, everyone to some extent seems to seek a new normality, and a lot of the time they find it by rejecting Japan's ideals. Ishii's output in the 90s is ultimately more mature, yet the same punk seems to be present within the narrative. He's still questioning Japanese ideals, life and society in a more approachable way now, where the brooding ever darkness seems to lie dormant, waiting to explode. The 2000s are a strange era for Ishii. While he continues to direct here and there, even making some of his final works like Electric Dragon, a swan song to the cyberpunk genre he helped create, he ultimately focuses on teaching and moves away from features until 2012 with Isn't Anyone Alive? A morbidly bleak film that follows seemingly random characters as they all slowly die. It seems even death is pointless now. It seems everything is pointless for Ishii. This film felt stylistically rather simple, and it lacked a clear sense of old rebellious nature that he had, as though now in his maturity he has lost hope of ever really changing anything. What's the point in anything if we can just die tomorrow? In the 2000s, Ishii has been more consistent than ever, but his ideals seem to be the most inconsistent they've ever been. It feels as though he is still trying to figure out how he fits into the modern climate of cinema, which is an ever-changing and rapidly different business than it ever was. Regardless of this, Ishii's first 2 decades as a director helped shape the very state of Japanese cinema now. His punk persistence visualized some of cinema's most striking images and ideas. His honest critiques of Japanese culture offered a profound voice to many that felt they had no voice. Ishii is without a doubt one of cinema's most important filmmakers. He's a true punk icon. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Ishii's one of my favourite filmmakers, and I've wanted to make a video about him for a while. I didn't really know how to approach it because he's just directed a lot of films, and I didn't want to go too in depth because I would like to maybe do some videos on individually his films by themselves and analyse them properly and give them the justified kind of analysis that they deserve, instead of creating this video that would have been astronomical in length, analysing all of his key themes and stuff like that. I hope this video encourages people to go and watch some of his work if you've not watched some of it, or just kind of gives you an idea of who he is and you can put him into context of your knowledge of Japanese cinema. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you do go and watch some of his films, and if you did, please like, comment and subscribe.